You're watching WECT News at 6.
Wilmington's voters approved 2 bond projects within the past decade. Transportation bond in 2014 and a parks bond 2 years later.
Those big projects have seen big price increases that have slowed down progress. WECT's Michael Pratt talked with city leaders about how the higher prices might impact what gets done and when.
It's been almost 10 years since the city of Wilmington voters approved a $44 million transportation bond, and about 7 years since they approved a $36 million parks bond. But progress is slow and costs are starting to add up.
City Councilman Luke Waddell says inflation, COVID-19, and the cost of materials all play a role in the increase in costs and the delays.
I think we're seeing just an amalgamation of all those items built on top of one another.
City Council isn't out there building sidewalks or bridges, but they do oversee these projects. Waddell said the way they're approaching the remaining projects needs to change.
So we're having to basically reprioritize what the voters really want. What did they ask for in that transportation bond in 2014? Let's hyper-focus on getting those items done.
Waddell wasn't on City Council when these projects were approved, but Mayor Bill Saffo was. He's seen just how much prices have changed, but is hopeful those costs will level out.
We have seen some costs that have come down, but not a lot. But we do anticipate that some of those costs overall long term will start to come down a little bit.
Right now, the parks projects are a little more than halfway completed, and transportation projects are taking even longer. Waddell says that's not unusual.
They move a little quicker because you're not doing right-of-way acquisition and some of those more intricate details that you're seeing on transportation bond projects. So
he says that these bonds have taught City Council valuable lessons about managing expectations and hopes that if there are future bond projects, the goals are easier to reach.
Despite the setbacks, City Council members are hopeful that things will continue to move forward, and hopefully some of these projects get completed and come in under budget. In Wilmington, Michael Pratt, WECT News.
The city of Wilmington is updating its pedestrian plan and wants to hear from you. The updated Walk Wilmington draft includes plans to increase pedestrian safety. Since the start of the new year, 2 people have been hit by cars walking in Wilmington. And just last month, a man died after he was hit on Market Street.